We saw the Illinois plane, which is supposed to deliver the Russian delegation to Alaska. But there are nuances. It seems to me that very little was said about this plane, which is actually supposed to deliver not only the Russian delegation, but also cocaine. More precisely, it has already delivered cocaine, and now, accordingly, it has to deliver to the Russian delegation. Or perhaps the Russian delegation will fly there with this valuable cargo, as they say. The fact is that this is the same Illinois 96 of the Special Flight Detachment of Russia with tail number RA 96023. This aircraft was used by Russian officials at various levels, for example, Russian Foreign Ministry spokeswoman Maria Zakharova, former Secretary of the Security Council of the Russian Federation Nikolai Patrushev, and was also used in 2016. On the territory of the school at the Russian embassy in Argentina, suitcases with cocaine, about 400 kilograms, were found in the same plane. It turns out that the plane is, multitasking, given who needs to be given a ride. Do we need to give Maria Zakharova or Putin a ride to Alaska? Of course, please. Do you need to bring 400 kilograms of cocaine? Of course, no problem. Do not really throw away the plane after that. The plane is good. Perhaps there is still a little cocaine left somewhere, because somehow you have to spend 9 hours on this plane.
A presidential trip, any presidential visit is always prepared for quite a long time. It is an unprecedented story for a visit of such importance as the meeting of the Russian presidents to the United States to be prepared for such unprecedented terms. Were there any difficulties? Here I am as a journalist, of course. I was a little nervous there, since I received my visa at the last moment. Were there any other organizational difficulties here?
Or you might not get it at all. A week ago, you did not have such an opportunity to get a visa to the United States at all. It wasn't nerve-wracking, but getting a visa on the last day was nervous. A Russian pool of Russian propagandists is going to Alaska. Look at the rotting West, see how it is there. But there is a nuance. The fact is that Alaska is a fairly popular tourist location. This is not Russia that you can go where you want and rent the hotel you want. This is Alaska. It's the tourist season there, everything is booked. Therefore, the Russian propagandists were told, okay, look, there are numbers for 74,000 rubles per day. And there is that settlement, we once built it at the stadium for those who are sick with COVID. Therefore, if you want, you can spend the night there. For free. Or 74,000, of course. Russian propagandists chose to live for free. Unfortunately, they didn't say, thank you for not being in prisons or a thank you for not being in the tents. Therefore, they will live in such a place of isolation. Previously, lepers were kept in places of isolation, and now Russian propagandists are being kept there. I just remembered it for some reason.
Indeed, an unprecedentedly short time frame for preparing for a meeting on the one hand. But we are now in an unprecedentedly unusual situation. And at the same time, President Trump demonstrates an unprecedentedly unusual approach to the solution.
And as I understand it, Peskov did a hairstyle like Trump's to please him, right?
The most complex issues, which is highly appreciated by Moscow and President Putin personally. President Putin always repeats that the most important thing for us is to resolve the Ukrainian conflict by political and diplomatic means. And President Trump, as it turns out, sincerely wants to help this.
No, President Trump wants Russia to stop shelling Ukraine, to stop active hostilities on the territory of Ukraine, to be more precise. And nothing was heard from President Trump about resolving the Ukrainian crisis, the Ukrainian issue. He wants to meet with Putin to look him in the eye and see the desire to stop the war there. But there is currently nothing to indicate that Putin wants to stop this war. Putin is trying to advance along the front line, gaining for himself the cherished kilometers. And in this way, he is trying to improve the situation on the ground when he tells Trump about it. He has already prepared historical analogies for himself, where he is going to show on maps from 4 directions that Ukraine has never existed, that it is actually land that belonged to different states, and that they have, as I understand, some legal right to it. Putin is also going to tell Trump that they are large nuclear powers, and thus settle this issue. Because do you think Putin is going there to talk about some frontline actions? About how many people he killed on the territory of Ukraine? Of course not.
To inform about the negotiation process on the Ukrainian crisis. How the negotiations are going with the Ukrainian delegation. One way or another, many of those present know, of course, in general. But I will tell you in more detail. This is the first thing. And the second is to talk about the stage at which we are with today's American administration, which, as everyone knows very well, supports, in my opinion, sufficiently vigorous, sparkling efforts in order to stop hostilities, stop the crisis and reach agreements that are of interest to all parties involved in this conflict. In order to create long-term conditions for peace between our countries, and in Europe, and in the world in general. If we reach agreements in the field of control over strategic offensives and troops by the next stages.
Strategic nuclear arms control is all that Putin may actually be interested in. Everything else is dust in the eyes of those who come to look at Putin and look into his mouth. That is all. Putin is interested in how the two major nuclear powers will divide this world. That's all Putin is interested in. And at the same time, let me remind you, on the territory of Russia, they continue to talk about the fact that Donald Trump is actually, not as independent as Vladimir Putin.
Do you understand what is the fundamental difference between Vladimir Vladimirovich Putin, Donald Trump?
Donald Trump looks better than Vladimir Vladimirovich Putin. These are all fundamental differences. And Donald Trump is the president-elect of the United States, and Putin is the appointed Tsar. He appointed himself, in fact, leads. Donald Trump is sticking to the idea, with some changes in international established rules and norms. Let's make America great without attacking neighboring states. And Putin wants to make Russia great by periodically attacking neighboring states. It's not that he lacks Russian territory, it's just that he has such entertainment. He just cannot live without war.
And all European leaders? European leaders comment on what Trump told them and work as Trump's press secretaries. And neither Putin nor Trump work as press secretaries. But everything that European politicians have said is aimed at ensuring that the meeting in Alaska ends in nothing.
So, in principle, it will end with nothing. But, you see, Russia believes that this should lead to something.